I had this nightmare, and I see my dad crash in his airplane. And so I woke my roommate up because I had to change the sheets because I wet the bed. And it's embarrassing to say, but that's how it scared me. So my roommate Sherry helped me change my sheets, and we talked about it. She says, Donna, you knew he was flying last night. I'm sure it's just a nightmare.
Right.
No, let's change the sheets and go back to sleep. Well, unfortunately, 3 hours later, there's a knock on my door. And my dad's business partner's daughter was there with my very best friend from high school to tell me that my dad was killed in an airplane crash.
Wow.
With 3 other men. They all went to the same church. They were flying to Harlingen to the airplane show, and they hit bad weather, and their plane went down.
Is Donna Hodge.
Hey,
Donna.
Hi.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good. So the Lifemark movie, I got to ask, when did you first hear about it?
When it was promoing, before it even came out. And so when I saw that it was coming out, I heard that it was based on the autobiography that was on YouTube. I lived on Parker Avenue.
Right.
So I lived on Parker Avenue and saw the real story of Melissa Cole and her choice to give life to David. And then it was about her finding David. And so then I went to see Lifemark, and man, Dawn Long, man, she really nailed Melissa in that movie.
Yes, she did.
And the two of them together, it just really blessed me. And so I immediately reached out to both of them, and they were so kind and gracious, and they responded to me. And now I like to say we're lifetime friends. And it's really blessed my life in tenfold.
That's so cool. And there, I know there's a lot of people with a lot of adoption stories, and a lot of people have seen the movie. So if you haven't seen it, go check it out. Lifemarkmovie.com. You can see all the ways to watch it. It's in the documentary, I Lived on Parker Avenue, that it's based on is just incredible. Have some tissues handy though.
Definitely.
It's definitely a must watch.
That's right.
So
and you see I'm wearing the shirt Brave Love.
Yes. Tell us what that is.
Yeah, Brave Love. It's a thing that started here in Texas, and it's for adopted moms, and it's for birth mothers, and it helps them there's no greater love than a birth mother's love, and they call it Brave Love. And so I think of Melissa, and when she chose to give David up, and my own birth mother chose to give me up. There's no greater love than that. They're heroes in my eyes, because they blessed Sandra blessed my mom and dad with me, and my mom and dad's life would have been totally different without me in it. So
well, like even the movie and that documentary, David Resounza, is the lives that are touched.
Yes.
And it's generations. Not just her decision.
Right.
To give life, but to make the choice and a plan for adoption. It's something in itself. So after you watch the movie, you're like, I want to tell my story now, or
I had already always known I was adopted, but it just made me really get real with it, and to look at from the beginning, from my birth to where I am today, and how I've become who I am today is all because of my adoption. I really believe it. It formed who I was, and so that's what I want to do.
That's great. And I appreciate you coming on to my little world and telling your story. Tell us, how did it all begin? You said you always knew you were adopted.
I did.
Do you remember the very first conversation or any of them?
Well, I remember coming home in kindergarten, and we had to draw a picture of our family, and I was the only one with white blonde hair. Straight white blonde hair. I had an older brother who was adopted as well, because my parents, they didn't think they could have kids. My mom had a miscarriage. So then they adopted my brother. And then 3 years later, they adopted me. And then boom, my mom ended up pregnant with my little sister. And so we're just a year, we're 15 months apart. And so when I brought home that picture that I drew, that's when it really hit me. I'm different. Why is my hair blonde and straight and these characteristics about me? But I always knew I was adopted because my brother had no warning of me. Mm-hmm. And so I was born the day that JFK was buried. And so the world shut down. And so I ended up being placed in a ladies' home for about a week before my parents got me. And the children's home just ended up calling up my mom and dad, said, hey, would Edward want a little sister? And so he had no warning of me. And so that was kind of a surprise to him. And so they brought me home. They came the next day and picked me up. They lived 2 hours away and came and picked me up. And so I've always known I was adopted. And
so was it a closed adoption or open adoption?
Oh, no. In the 60s, it was closed. But they did allow my birth mother, her name was Sandra, they did allow her to hold me because her situation, she got pregnant by, unfortunately, a preacher that was a little bit older than her with the church she went to. And so the elders of the church loaded her up and brought her out here to West Texas to give me up for adoption. And then she went back home and her mom died 1 month to the day I was born. And so they allowed her, they knew her mom was dying. They knew she had no other options. So they allowed her to hold me and have some time with me before she put me up for adoption. I know they do that all the time now, right, but back then they usually didn't. And so we connected. And so then by the time my mom and dad came and picked me up and brought me home, my mom she's always said, the only time you would let me hold you if I was giving you a bottle. I was pretty much like this,
Oh, wow.
And so that's an attachment disorder. And
is that common?
It is very common and it can be common in adoptees if there's a time lapse in the placement. And apparently I did bond with my birth mother. Of course, I didn't know it, but I did. And so a counselor explained it to me that it's like, as an infant, you have that, and then all of a sudden it's taken away from you, and you're just constantly trying to get more here and there and can't contain it and can't obtain it. Right. And so, anyway, moving forward a little bit, in school, I had to go to speech therapy. I was kind of behind a little bit. I struggled with speech therapy, reading, dyslexia, had to have glasses, had to have braces, something totally different than my brother and sister. So that kind of really bothered me. And so then I became a daddy's girl because my mom had my sister, and they really bonded. She could breastfeed her. They really connected. And so my dad and I connected. And so I became a kind of a tomboy and wanted to be the bat girl on his baseball team, wanted to do everything that Dad did. So Dad, they wouldn't even let me do that in the 60s, be a bat boy or bat girl. And so Dad started softball in Sweetwater. My dad started that just so I could play softball. And then he started me on the golf team. And so I did a lot of sports and recreational and a lot of that kind of stuff with my dad. And he was behind all that in my life. So then when I was 12, I had just turned 12, and it was New Year's Day, January the 1st, 1976. That night before, I had a nightmare. Woke me up screaming, crying, and Dad came to my rescue, and I was crying and upset. And I told him that I had seen my birth mother kill herself. And he was like, Dawn, it's just a nightmare, it's
That's
nothing.
What any parent would.
Yeah. Who would do that, And so he and I had this conversation, and I did not want to hurt my mom's feelings ever. And my mom, she never thought about me being adopted. I was always hers, and I am hers. Mm-hmm. And so that was kind of a conversation between me and my dad for years then. And he told me, he says, well, when you turn 18, we'll go to the children's home, and I'll prove to you that she's not, that's just a nightmare. And
let's look at the picture here before you finish that part of this. Now, of course, this is you in the middle.
Yeah, that's me in the middle with my brave love. And unfortunately, I just shaved my head in that picture for a friend that went through cancer. So
Okay.
I was kind of lacking hair in that one. But my mom and dad in that upper corner, that's my mom and dad. And then my mom made me that stitch, Donna, not flesh of my flesh, nor bone of my bone, but still miraculously my own. Never forget for a single moment you didn't grow under my heart, but in it. So my mom made that for me. And then that's me. That's a baby picture of me in that other corner. So my birth mother is on both sides of me. So that's Sandra.
Wow.
So, you can see where I get my lips.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's Sandra.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had this nightmare that she had killed herself.
Yes.
Was it detailed nightmare?
It was very detailed. It was very detailed.
Oh,
and
wow.
it was a nightmare that I continued to have over and over.
So not just one time.
No. It continued on. And Dad would find me a lot. In fact, I have this picture of I'm laying on the couch, sleeping on the couch, and Dad took that picture of me because that's where he would find me a lot. And so I just had, issues with the sleeping and that nightmare. And it kind of, and I was very fixated on my birth mother. I remember I would watch the Brady Bunch and think, oh, Carol Brady must be my birth mother. You fantasize. Kids do that all the time with their birth, about their birth mothers.
Well, she had blonde hair. You had blonde hair.
Yeah.
Why not?
I didn't know.
Crazier things happen.
Yeah. So anyway, so I had these conversations with my dad, but as I said, I did not ever want to hurt my mom's feelings. And so then Dad said, we'll find, I promise we'll find her. So then let's move on forward. So then I'm 18 and graduated from high school, and I'm going to school out in Lubbock, which is where I was adopted from, was Lubbock. And so I go out there, and Dad had promised, he says, well, you come home this weekend, and then the next weekend I'll come up there and we'll go to the children's home and we'll find out about your birth mother. And so I was really looking forward to it, but I was more looking forward to seeing Dad that upcoming weekend. So this was October the 6th, 1982, and I was a freshman in the dorm. And I, in the middle of the night, wake my roommate up because unfortunately I'm screaming.
And you're what, 18, 19?
I'm 18 years old. And
your first nightmare was when you were 13?
12.
12. So from 12 to 19.
To 18.
Okay.
Yeah, from 12 to 18.
Okay.
So then when I'm 18, a freshman in the dorm, I have this nightmare and I see my dad crash in his airplane. And so I woke my roommate up because I had to change the sheets because I wet the bed. And it's embarrassing to say, but that's how it scared me. So my roommate Sherry helped me change my sheets, and we talked about it. And she says, Donna, you knew he was flying last night. I'm sure it's just a nightmare.
Right.
Let's change the sheets and go back to sleep. Well, unfortunately, 3 hours later, there's a knock on my door. And my dad's business partner's daughter was there with my very best friend from high school to tell me that my dad was killed in an airplane crash.
Wow.
With 3 other men. They all went to the same church. They were flying to Harlingen to the airplane show, and they hit bad weather, and their plane went down. And
now your dad, was he's the pilot?
He was the co-pilot.
The co-pilot?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, he was the co-pilot. So it knocked me off my socks.
I can't even imagine.
I did not do it. I did not take it well.
I'm sure.
So I went home to the funeral, came back, went back to school, did not want to go to school, but did to honor my dad and honor my mom. And so I was having trouble sleeping. So I went to the school nurse and I said, man, I can't sleep. I'm having nightmares. So now I'm having a nightmare with Sandra and I'm having a nightmare with my dad.
So they continued.
It continued.
Nightmares continued.
Yes, it continued. And I find out later it's PTSD. I mean, I had it to the max and, but I didn't know it at the time.
Yeah.
And so I started, the school nurse told me to go get NyQuil. NyQuil in 1982 is different than it is today. It did have alcohol, pretty good amount of alcohol. So I'm going and buying NyQuil, and I did not know that, biologically I had a grandfather that was a severe alcoholic, and I didn't know about that in my past. And
so you're chugging NyQuil hoping you can sleep better, which you probably did.
I did.
But now you're getting addicted.
I'm getting addicted, and I was addicted. And so then here I am going to this private school that I could have gotten kicked out of. And next thing I know, in Lubbock, it was dry at the time, a dry city where you can buy alcohol. There, we had the place called the Strip, and you have to drive out there to pick up alcohol. And so I'm driving out there, and next thing I know, I'm buying vodka just to sleep. I was a functioning alcoholic, and no one knew it. I never went to the bars. I seriously,
Right.
I was a closet drinker.
You upped your tolerance with the NyQuil, I guess, right?
The NyQuil.
And NyQuil got old, so you went to vodka.
Went to vodka.
Oh man.
And so then I then ended up transferring. I went to Baylor Dental School, finished my degree there. I went through dental hygiene, became a dental hygienist. But I came back to Lubbock, and when I came back to Lubbock, by then my alcohol drinking is really bad, and I then am having physical problems. And I called my mom, and so she finally called the children's home, and we knew my grandmother died of cancer. My biological grandmother died of cancer. So mom said, please let Donna know about her birth mother, and because we were told that she just died in an accident, and I needed to let it go. And but then I started having female issues, and I was having to have exploratory surgery myself. And so so then I met with the counselor at the children's home, and she said, well, your mom didn't die of cancer, but she died January the 1st, 1976. I said, suicide, right? Gunshot wound to the head. And they said, yeah. So all that time, the gunshot wound to the head, wow. January 1st, 1976, that's the nightmare I had.
Wow.
So
were they kind of freaked out that you knew?
They did.
Somebody leaked it or something?
The counselor
didn't even believe you?
Yeah, the counselor was like, how'd you know? And I said, that's why I've been, I've seen it. I had that nightmare. And so then they set me up with a counselor, thank goodness, at the children's home, and I could kind of talk through things. But then my drinking escalated. Next thing I know, I'm smoking marijuana and functioning as a dental hygienist, and just could not cope. So then I start taking on the guilt. Why do kids do this? But you take on the guilt of death, and I took on the guilt of her suicide because I was in her suicide letter, because the children's home did have that. And then I ended up meeting my half brother and half biological sister. And
so there was a suicide note. Let me interrupt you. When did you get to see that?
The children's home gave it to me. No, actually, it wasn't the children's home. It was my biological brother and sisters. It was their father had the suicide note.
Okay.
And
was it right away?
Huh?
How soon was it?
It was that was when I was 20. By then I was 25.
Okay.
And
so it wasn't like all at once.
No. After I found them, then I met with their dad. And that's when he gave me the suicide note, because he did not want Kimberly, the oldest daughter, to have it, because it talked about her. She listed reasons to kill herself and reasons not to kill herself. And at the top of the reason to kill herself was the birth of me, the guilt of me. Well, he didn't want Kimberly to think that was about her, because they didn't know about me at that time. Wow. So Kimberly and my half brother and sister, they didn't know I even existed. And so we had to there were some years in there we were getting to know each other, and so, but having that note, and it really kind of set me back a little bit. And
I'm sure.
So then I started feeling guilty about that. Not that it's mine to take, but to move on way past that is that the good news is that I got to be in Kimberly's wedding for her when she met her husband, and they're in my life, I'm in their life, not all the time, but we
that's great.
We'll call each other, get to be together here or there. And so Kimberly has 2 daughters, so I got to be an aunt to 2 nieces, where my brother and sister, they have all boys, so I'm an aunt to nephews, and I'm an aunt to nieces. So that's a blessing in that, is that we got to have meet each other and be in each other's lives. But going back a little bit, is that I, because of my health issues, I ended up having to have a hysterectomy at 25. I had endometriosis. And then that was the other good thing about finding out about my biological, is that I found out all these things that I thought just made me horribly different. You know, Kimberly had issues with it. Wayne had issues with it. So, you know, we all had glasses. We all had reading problems. Wayne stuttered like I stuttered. And so, you know, that's kind of cool and to know that I have cousins out there that had endometriosis, and they, unfortunately, one of them, they've gone through hysterectomies too at a young age. And so,
Wow.
you know, we never had kids.
Right.
So then I finally get fed up and drinking and with the counselor. This counselor told me that if I would start going to a meeting and getting help, that she would help me. And so I got sober June the 5th, 1995. I finally gave my life to Christ. I had already really given it to him, but I rededicated my life to him.
Right.
And so I got sober and haven't had a drink or a smoke or anything since then.
And what year was that?
June the 5th of 1995.
1995.
Coming up on 30 years now.
That's awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, you went through quite a bit, and then you know, so basically you had these visions that came true, and then you went, you know, to numb all that pain, you basically became an alcoholic, and then you went and got treatment and rededicated your life. I mean, talk about an arc, as they say. Wow.
And then I ended up 2 years after sobriety. You know, you're not supposed to be in a relationship till you have 2 years of sobriety. So then I ended up meeting a man that had 3 daughters. He was widowed. And I thought, this is perfect. I can adopt the girls, and, you know, I can be there for the girls. Well, you know, it doesn't always work out like you think. Unfortunately, they had their hurts and hadn't dealt with their losses.
Oh, wow.
And we ended up in a counseling office, and what got us to the counseling office is then I was diagnosed with cancer and non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and my oncologist sat me aside and he said, and he knew my husband and the kids and the situation I was in, and he said, I don't know what's going on with you, but the route you're going, you know, if you don't change something, you're going to be dead. I had non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and he said, you're going to be dead before you're 40. And he said, you need to get some help. And so I talked to my husband and the girls. I said, we got to get counseling. We need to get some help. And they agreed. They went to a few counseling sessions with me, and then they wouldn't go anymore. And they didn't want to. And so you can't make a marriage work by yourself. And so this counselor said, and he really spoke to me, and I thought, you know, this is my life too, is that when you're hurt, he said, you're like a cup, and you have a hole in your cup, and you're pouring in your love, you're pouring in your time, you're pouring in your money, you're pouring everything you can into this relationship. Until they fix their hurt, until they fix their hole, they can't receive anything you're giving them. And so I was like, whoa, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I was just stressing out over trying to make this marriage work. And we were just being attacked from every direction. So I spoke to the elders of the church and told them, you know, what I was going to do, that I was going to divorce my husband. And well, then the next thing I know, I'm getting kicked out of church from the pulpit. And
now let me ask, is this not the same? Is this not the same church as from earlier? Okay, because you're moved on. Okay, I was going to say, okay,
this is an old belief church that I no longer am a part of, and so you know that kind of set me back too, because then I'm going to counseling and I'm like, okay, rejection here, now kick out of the church, and like, what is going on with me? And so then that is when I finally was like, I ended up going to Holy Lands with some friends, and she had just lost her husband. And so I was like, I want to get baptized in the Jordan River. I know it's just the Jordan River and it's just water.
But still, it's the Jordan River.
Yeah. And it was just, you know what? God can heal me. He healed me from that loss. And there we are. That's my dear friend. That's awesome. Dear Bishop family. And we all got baptized in the Jordan River. And from that point on, I ended up buying a ring over there, and I wear that ring, and it says, be still and know that I am God, because that is my life verse. And as I was going through all this, it kept saying, just be still and know I am God. And God has brought me through all that. And
Wow.
I have 20 years of, nearly 30 years of sobriety, 20 years of cancer-free. And God is using me for ministry for women and with their addiction, as well as other people with adoption, as well as I got to sponsor some kids at the children's home and get them prepared for their adoption. And so, it just, I wouldn't have had any of this if I had not been adopted. If I didn't have the mom and dad that chose to give me a name, to give me the Hodge name. And it's kind of funny, and I don't say this to say anything mean about, biological kids, but
Right.
My dad used to tell me, hey, Donna, we chose you. Other kids
Right.
they're stuck with, but
Right.
we chose you. And he just tried to tell me that to
Right.
comfort me and say,
Right.
you're chosen. And that's what God has done for all of us. I mean, he has adopted, most importantly, God has adopted us. And we are his children.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the whole point of that. Adoption is a gift from God.
Yeah.
And so I just want kids that are adopted out there to know you are treasured and you are loved. And to birth mothers, man, thank you. Thank you, Melissa Cole. Thank you, Sandra Walker. Thank you, all you birth mothers that gave us life, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Sandra.
Well, and first and foremost, if God hadn't got a hold of you, which he did get a hold of you, but you listened.
Yes.
And that's the number one thing right there. You finally
It took 13 years of drinking to listen, but
right.
He finally
yeah. But I mean, look at all that has transpired. Look from where you came to where you are now. I mean, no one would have guessed if coming from that to where you are now. That's just amazing. I'll show one last picture here.
Oh yeah. Yes. That is my dad's truck. That is a 62 truck that I had restored, and I was driving it in the parade. And then I am on the Caltrain at the farm out here in Aladu and in Lubbock. I drive the Caltrain for the little kids, and I'm retired from dental hygiene. So now I am an official Caltrain driver at the corn maze in Lubbock, and I absolutely love it.
That is awesome.
That's what I do now.
And that's such a touching story and encouragement for others. And that's one of the reasons I do this podcast, this YouTube channel, is to give people a chance to tell their story and it be an encouragement to others, because there's so many people that have gone through adoption, that have gone through hardships, that have gone through all these things.
Yes.
And don't think they'll come out on top when they can.
They can. They can.
They absolutely can.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Donna, for coming on. I appreciate it so much. And you choosing me to let your voice be heard and letting God let your voice be heard.
Well, thank you, Jeff. And hey, I want to put a sound plug out there for the movie that we're trying to get made. It's called Made with Love.
Yes.
And really want y'all, if you can, to support it. It's about a Down syndrome boy that wants to be in a movie, and we're trying to get the word out that there's a lot of good, Down syndrome kids that their life matters, and they mean the world to us, and they bless us with their unconditional love. And so I would like to put a plug-in out there for Made with Love. If y'all can support that movie, it would bless me.
Absolutely. Well, I got the website up on there, and they can just go to that to find out more information. Thanks, Donna.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate you.
You bet.